This is the Realty Classroom Podcast, episode number 72, Why You Should Build Your Own Franchise. Are you a real estate agent with an entrepreneurial spirit who wants to turn your job into a business without sacrificing your lifestyle, but you just can't seem to find the right plan to help you get there? Well, then, hey, you're definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Realty Classroom and the host of this podcast. And to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction or maybe build a better real estate agent business than the one you already have, I've created a free jumpstart course to help that management brain get started. And it's sitting right over there at freeagentgift.com. It's on demand. It's a digital course. Get in there. It's nice and easy, but it really puts things in the right order so you can think about them as a manager and manage something that's more predictable. All right, let's get started. Why you should build your own franchise. What's this guy talking about? Am I supposed to become the next Ray Kroc of McDonald's? Yes, you are. And that's the first point here. There's a reason why Ray Kroc, probably about my age, right? 53-ish, and he's out there and he's a salesman and he's selling these milkshake machines, amongst other things, to these joints. And the McDonald's brothers have this joint that does things a little bit differently. Or a lot a bit differently. Very organized systems. They've got multiple shake machines going at once. A lot of things are happening, and what he sees is something unique. Something fully leveraged. This isn't an ordinary hamburger stand, although it might look like one. Same size, same amount of people, but they're serving more people. They're putting out quality product at a high speed, and he looks at it and he says, that's the thing. I just need to grab that franchise and buy it and organize it a little bit better and then proliferate it across, well, you know how the rest of the story goes, right? So it really starts by backing up and first saying, well, a lot of you are going to sit there and say, well, I don't like McDonald's food. Now that you're missing the point. Don't go down into what it is. It's more how it's done. You see, there's a truth to the way that every business works. And my fave is Michael Gerber's saying that where he says, you have to figure out how the business really works. And what does that mean? Well, I find as a coach and a guide of a mastermind that oftentimes we get caught up in our own theory, our own perception. It turns out the longer I get in the tooth, meaning the older I get, I'm realizing all along that we are delusional about a lot of things. And that's because our primitive brain has to shut down so often. It doesn't want to think beyond what it can handle. Like David Goggins says in his great motivational videos, your brain is this primitive thing that you get to about 40%, it just shuts down. It says, that's enough. Calm down. So we don't go further. We don't get more curious about how the business works. So if you're going to be in small business, and especially real estate, which is always difficult, no matter what's going on, it's hot, it's difficult to find properties for buyers, etc. It's not, you can't get a seller to price it right. I get it. I mean, it's constantly under assault. But if you wake up each day as a real estate agent with a curiosity for how the business works today, how it's going to work tomorrow, like Gretzky, where's the puck going to be sort of thing. You're curious, but stop starting with theory. Don't do that. You see, ultimately, the most important part of the puzzle is the next point here. You have to figure out what the consumer wants first. So if you were deciding to get into real estate agency for the first time, there's a tendency to look at what somebody like me who's already in the business for 20 years is doing and maybe try to copy me. But really, my best advice is I wouldn't do that. I'd ask a lot of people who are thinking about buying or selling that are your friends. Just get into those conversations. Say, what do you want? Like for help and guidance. What do you really want? You want to buy a house, and what do you want? Well, I just want somebody to X. I wish somebody would just tell me why. You see, it's this polling mentality, and I've heard it for years in the context of marketing. Well, before you start running your ads, why don't you find out what they want, create a solution for it, and then call out to them? And it's logical. And a lot of people say, well, I've got to go get this thing, Survey Monkey, and I've got to go get all these. No, you don't. You have to just get in a conversation and ask somebody who might be an end user in your business. In our case, who might be an end user of a house. Ask them what they want for help. Say, when you're going through the process, and you're dealing with that consumer perception too. When everything went online, for example, the consumer says, well, I just want the convenience of looking at it on my phone and I don't want to be bothered. Wonderful. And that's why a lot of these companies that you all fret as real estate agencies showed up on our business forefront, and they took over a lot of the eyeballs. You know why? I'm telling you, this is what they did. They just looked at it as themselves as competitors, as consumers, and said to themselves, hey, you know what I want? I want easy access to properties. This real estate agent business has had this long run of having this stuff protected behind a wall and making us jump through their hoops. But as a consumer, I just want it. And that was the great equalizer in the internet where all of a sudden the consumer was set free. In other words, they didn't have to go through a lot of these gateway, the gatekeepers through this gateway to get the access to the information. It was just there. And so the smart early adopters of this mentality, which by the way was always good practices, but the internet made you do this. They just opened up the doors and gave it to them. Why? Consumer wanted it. And what did they get rewarded with? Eyeballs, and lots of them. And what did that get them? Us to pay them for the eyeballs. Crazy. It's just absurd. We're saying that technology-oriented companies, and not really tech companies, they just did a better job of what any of us have access to and displayed it on the web better. You want to call that a tech company? I don't know. That doesn't sound too sophisticated to me. It just sounds like better service. And that's what they did. So they figured out what the consumer wanted first, and they got the eyeballs and the traffic. And when you have the traffic, now you can really figure out the best way to serve these people, right? But here's the problem with those tech companies, quote unquote, or those service companies that were doing a better job. They're not real estate agencies. And even the ones that are big that gave it away for free that are trying to do it, what do they end up defaulting to? Oh, we'll give you half the commission back, they say. Oh, we'll only list the property for this. Well, you know why they do that? Because they don't really know what it takes to take a buyer or a seller through a process. So their default is they think they can put pressure on the margin. And I know there's all this antitrust stuff going on out there about, commissions. Okay, so what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to delete commissions down to the bare minimum where nobody has any money to pay for their time, their effort, their marketing, all of what goes into a transaction? All of a sudden, nobody's supposed to get paid? Well, it's just not going to work. So you can put these downward pressures on margin, but that's not really what the consumer wants. Not in my experience, at least. And here I am 20 years later and well into a good solid 10 years into how the internet has affected real estate agency. And we're finding more so than ever before, the consumer wants an honest understanding of how this really works. They don't want to be hoodwinked into saying you've got international buyers. They don't want to be hoodwinked into saying you've got a gajillion leads that are somehow going to buy their house. They don't want that stuff. They want an honest presentation of how they're going to go through the process, how this really works. And unless you start, like I'm saying today, with that concept of your franchise prototype, you want to be different? Here, I am giving you the most unique way to approach building your business. AKA, as Michael Gerber calls it, a franchise prototype, meaning what? That you look at what they want and then you begin to build plans and systems that are repeatable and predictable that serve them to give a predictable result. See, not everybody is going to tell you that a McDonald's hamburger is the best hamburger in the world. You might get Joe's Hamburger off the side of a street, driving 95 south down to Florida. I don't know. You might find it there. Why people continue to go in the billions is because they want consistency. They want predictability, and they don't want surprises. See, that's what this is about. You'd love to see somebody like McDonald's continue to push the health agenda, but they've just gotten so into what the consumer wants. What do you want them to do? Stop? If the consumer keeps showing up, they keep showing up. I know there's some detrimental effects to any business that doesn't have a conscience and sits up there and says, hey, maybe this isn't the best. Maybe we need better standards and moral obligation to the public. Sure, maybe not, depending on the company. But the key really is they have built this predictable result. And that's why people go back. No surprises. They get it done. Nobody wants more stress. What did I tell you? If you go in and confuse the consumer with your franchised way of doing it, well, I think this might work, and I'm going to try this, and I'm going to guess at this price. What do you think's happening to that consumer? Do you think they're likely, even if they finish that transaction with you, do you think they're likely to easily refer you? Hey, that gal has a great system. They took me through it. It had 7 steps and it was stressful. Oh my gosh, the whole thing was stressful. And there I was stressing up, but they just kept telling me where I was and how it was going. And I have this predictable result. You should go try them. They really have their stuff together. Sounds nice, doesn't it? Happens for us all the time when it comes to especially listings, because we're very, very clear about how we take people through that process. Now, that emotional part of it really can throw you off, so that as you're trying to stick to a system, you say, but, not everybody's the same. I understand. I totally agree. Hey, quite frankly, when I'm recording this podcast, I am in the thick of I'm down in my basement studio here recording this. I'm in the thick of a move myself. On offering my property, 2 weeks to close, but it was at the right number. And I said yes. And I got really emotional about all of the negotiation, my net sheet and all this. That's for the next podcast. I'll get into math, the next one. I'm going to tell you live while I'm still feeling it, how math matters in this. And that becomes part of this franchise prototype. That when you really go in there and say, okay, calm down. You know where you're at. You're at that negotiation stage. You have your math. You have your net sheet. Go back. Don't get upset that it's your own house and you're not getting exactly the number you want yet. Be patient. And I was. So even when I became my own consumer, I went back to my franchise prototype steps and I followed them with the same advice. And I came to a really good spot with the buyer where everybody's happy. The attorneys are happy. The agents are happy. Amazing. Doesn't happen very often, but the more that I even myself stuck to the steps that I take through, I'm following that franchise prototype. In other words, and by the way, I did work at McDonald's when I was a kid, when I was 14 years old. I had the experience there, and I was put in a very specific spot at the register. And I was right next to the fry station. And I know that the buzzer would go off at a very particular number of seconds. I know the same would be behind me. The burgers were, placed on and the timer was off and everything was just very predictable. And like I said, people kept coming to that register trying to buy stuff because of that predictable result. So the same thing in my own business that I learned when I was 14, I am implementing. And my market is very tough. A lot of the markets across the country are very tough. Ever since the recession, nothing's been easy. Everything comes with warts on it. Why? Because people were really hurt by that recession and they haven't forgotten. You can do anything you want with the stock market. You can do anything you want with interest rates. People were emotionally scarred by the last, go round. And subsequently, my kids, it's interesting to watch them, are all being raised conservatively. They want to save money. They want to live small. So we're getting to a place where nothing's going to be simple and easy like it was in the early 2000s where we were out of control. People were just out of control. Real estate was out of control. There's a systematic way that things happen. And the more that you can build those systems into your business, the better you can explain it to the consumer and calm them down a little bit, just to see the logic of the moment. By the way, I'm experiencing this with expireds right now. I'm on a regular, in my office, where we're putting the formulaic stuff in place. And by the way, that's point number 3 here. Memorializing a formulaic approach to guidance. It's not just like you come up with the 7 steps and you sort of do it each time and you sort of teach it to the people in your team. I'm telling you, you create physical implementation of it, like an infographic, a booklet, and you use that booklet every time. You do not cheat your system. And I did, guilty, several times while I was getting back in this rhythm of going on these listing presentations to these expired properties. I noticed myself cheating my own franchise prototype, and it was obvious. And I was losing a little bit of the control over the process. And I could see the consumer was needing more time to think because I was missing little pieces, not big ones, little hinges swinging big doors, right? Questions that we ask before we go in, very formulaic, very particular layout in the folder so that when I sit across from people, I put certain implements across the table at a certain point in time and leave them with this net sheet, which I had been cheating on. And last night, fresh off of a listing presentation, here I am doing this. I'm telling you, I have never been so certain that my franchise prototype for at least that listing phase was tight and beneficial to that consumer. And I know that when I walked out of that consumer's house, who's not quite ready to sell yet because it's rented for the summer, she knew where she stood. And she also came to realize it was more about her feelings about whether or not she was on the same page with her husband to sell this. But that's the benefit of a franchise prototype. I didn't go in there and confuse her with all these wild claims about marketing. I showed her a systematic approach from pricing to dealing with the conditioning and staging, then memorializing that footprint digital, making some references to, hey, your pictures look fine, except I don't see a drone photo that shows that the water's right there. The village is right here. So tweaking that, but showing her in that formulaic approach how I'm different. What the unique selling proposition is that I'm following this formula that we've learned from, and that each time we recognize there's a little tiny piece missing in what you should have done the first time. So you memorialize all those little formulas and you repeat them. And then you refine them. Talked about that a lot, right? But let me get to the next point here. That's the listing presentation formulaic approach. But oftentimes small business people, especially real estate agents, don't get up above the whole thing. And that's a franchise prototype methodology that I learned somewhere between Napoleon Hill's book talking about Henry Ford assembly lines and Michael Gerber's idea of the manager. See, Michael Gerber says you have to be three people. You have to be the entrepreneur with the vision. Okay, well, that visionary has to get macro economic. You have to get way above the whole business and say, well, how's the whole thing work? What does it really look like? Now that gets overwhelming when you consider it, right? You're like, oh, I just want to sell a house. Well, every time you sell a house, if you've even sold one, you've gone through an assembly line manufacturing process. You've already done it. It's just that you never took pause to think about everything that you were doing, memorialize it. Hey, when I met them, I did this. When I took them out, I did this. When I listed it, I did this. That's memorializing your formulas so that you get it out of your head onto paper and then you repeat it the next time and refine it. But there's micro sections of it. So in other words, there's all this marketing that's dizzying these days. I said it, dizzying. When you're looking at how to work Facebook, how to work LinkedIn, a lot of my members and my mastermind level were some of the smartest, most prolific people in this business across both Canada and the United States. These people just shut down. I can hear it on the other end of the mastermind. We have to slow it down and chunk it up and say, look, hold on. Let's just take the easiest piece, put the big rocks proverbially into the jar first. What's the basic thing in a franchise prototype for marketing? Okay. Well, first of all, it's that whole concept of knowing where, narrow down. Stop trying to do these huge areas or something that's too small. Find that place strategically where you can market to. Then what's your message? I have a plan that's a formulaic approach that will give you a pretty predictable result if you're buying or selling, and you won't have to have all the stress. That's a great message, and it's unique. Because nobody takes the time to build these simple formulas, you could do it this week by just sitting down and saying, hey, here's what I do. And if you're new, ask a pro, interview them. A lot of them can't even tell you, but you'll find one that does. Yep, I do this, right? Good. Start to copy those formulaic approaches of successful people. So now you're putting those together. I have this marketing module. Then I have to take somebody from lead to prospect to client, conversion module. Then I have to close with care, because if I don't close with care, well, then they're not going to like me and repeat with me or refer. They're going to think I was just there for the check. Third module, right? That's the closing. So marketing goes into conversion, goes into closing, and goes into what? Past client community. Half of you just forget your sphere of influence and don't do anything intentionally. Say, hey, it's me. Here's how the market's doing. I thought I'd let you know every quarter. Just so you know, because you bought a financial instrument for me and I know it's home, but I'd like you to know what's going on around you. I feel responsible. Those are the modules that run this business. So if Henry Ford and Gerber came to me, I'm prepared because I took their advice. I sat down and I chunked it up into a simple infographic that says, here's my vision for it. I'd like to be a company that serves as many people as possible. That meets my personal mantra of being a person for others. I want the business to be the same. So what we've done is we've built plans for buyers and sellers because those are the people that make up the business. And here's how I'm going to manage that. Then I get down to the technical level. Here's exactly what I do tactically and technically with my marketing. Here's technically what we do and say on the phone to telemarketing. Here's technically what we do when we're following up. You get it, right? You get it. That's the big picture. It's simple. You're doing it, but you have to chunk it up to understand that it's a formula and begin to memorialize, right? Then ultimately, the last thing is in this franchise, if you went to McDonald's, man, they can measure everything. Everything. I can remember when I was bringing some food out from a freezer and I brought it out front, there was one bad and I just didn't account for it. I threw it in the trash, right? And they're like, what happened to this blueberry pie? Literally, I'm not kidding. 14 years old. What happened to the blueberry pie? Then they pulled me in the office one day after the register. I was on there and they're like, your drawer was off 10 cents. 10 cents. We want you to know that. So if you don't think these franchise prototypes are built, number one, to give predictability, but number two, to be measurable, then you just don't understand them. So the more refined that it is, the more certain you become as the business owner as to how it works. Okay, so let me summarize these points. This is why you should think about it at least as a franchise prototype, meaning your business is going to become this model everybody else can copy, so you better write down what you do. The first point was Ray Kroc bought the McDonald's hamburger stand because it already had a lot of these systems in place. And he was like, Eureka, this thing is fabulous. These guys have killed them in one micro store, but I could duplicate this thing. And I could bring these people through like the McDonald's brothers are bringing them through, fast and furiously with a predictable result. But you have to start off by figuring out, like the McDonald's brothers did, that's what people wanted. They wanted speed, convenience, right? Time and convenience mattered to people. They wanted to pick up their hamburger, get fed. They don't want to wait. Somebody, cooked it. I want it now. They figured that out. And then they built systems, which was the third point, memorializing this formulaic approach to doing it. It's the only way you can do it. Multiple milkshake machines at the same time, multiple burgers being cooked in advance of the number that they think will be sold that day, right? And then you organize all the microsystems from the fries to the burgers to the register, all those things, who cleans the front of the room, all those things are organized into a bigger system. So microsystems chunked up, and I just chunked mine up for you, put together, and then it's all measurable. And so when it's measurable, you know what's working and what's not, and you make your adjustments, okay? So let me chunk up a key point here. A franchise centers around the concept of a system of organization. I'll repeat that first line. A franchise centers around the concept of a system of organization. That organization performs consistently to get a predictable result for whom? For the consumer. And continues to evolve based on the patterns of the consumer, not the human discretion of the owner in the organization's people. In other words, your consumer is your boss. You keep refining your systems to give them more of what they want, and they'll keep coming and referring, all right? Now, remember, you can take immediate action to get started building your franchise prototype. This is the idea. I try to chunk these things up for you so you see these macro, and then you can dive down into the micro on these podcasts when I get into it. You get started in the right direction by going over and get this free, simple business plan. It's a little combo of the technical work and the management. It's over at freeagentgift.com. That'll get you started. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so that you don't miss out on any insights each time we upload an episode. We also broadcast our live sales training calls where you can hear some of that micro technical work on Fridays. We put it on Facebook and YouTube every Friday at 1 p.m. ET. And you can go look at the replays there now. They're both sitting there live. Go check them out. So remember to turn on your page and channel notifications. Click that little bell on YouTube, and that'll let you know when I go live so you don't forget it. And you won't miss anything. And we'll see you there. We also appreciate if you would share our content with other entrepreneurial real estate agents just like you so that they also get the help that they need. Again, trying to be a person for others here. Join me in that call to action. Hey, thanks for listening. Remember, nobody's coming for you. So go get to work on your own business. And in this case, your own franchise prototype. See you in the next episode.